Well, hi everybody, and welcome to Academic Entrepreneurship. This is a webinar that's brought to you by Johns Hopkins University's Advanced Academic Program. My name is Tristan Cabello. I am the Associate Director for the Master of Liberal Arts here at Johns Hopkins University. And this webinar is part of the series of webinars that we've had during the spring semester about pursuing an academic career. So the first webinar was on PhD studies. The second one was on conferences. The third one today is going to be on entrepreneurship. And the fourth one, which is scheduled in April, will be on publishing. And so today we are welcoming Dr. Kimberly Rose Pendleton, who is a gender studies and American studies scholar. She received her PhD from George Washington University in American Studies, and she's also an MLA professor. She will be teaching a course this summer for the MLA program. And Kim is also a intimacy coach, and she has her own coaching business that she built right after her PhD studies. And so this conversation is going to be very inspiring to a lot of you and to me, because Kim is going to share her knowledge about how to build a business based on the academic knowledge that you have acquired at AAP or further on in your PhD studies, and how to be a successful academic entrepreneur. We will have a Q&A right after Kim's presentation. But without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Kimberly Rose Pendleton to AAP.
Thank you so much. I'm so just pleased to be here, so honored to be having this conversation, and a little nervous too, because I feel like this is one of those topics that I know going through my own graduate career, we didn't spend a lot of time talking about. And it even felt maybe even a little bit off limits to think about some of the ways that we can use our academic training outside of the academy. It felt a little bit like that's what you do if you're kind of being a little bit of a rebel. And so it's interesting to just notice that even all these years later, I still feel that a little bit. But I'm excited for our conversation, excited for the questions. And, I plan to tell my own story a little bit, to talk a little bit about my business now and how it connects to my scholarship and my graduate training. And then to start to open up some different avenues where for those of you who are considering something similar or even just aren't sure yet how this could be related, but it could just maybe plant a seed, and then further down the road it could be something that's at least on the menu of options in a way that I think it would really serve the world for more academics to be out doing this kind of work. So anyway, all that to say, like Tristan said, I'm Kimberly Rose Pendleton. I have a PhD from GW and a master's from Yale, and I spent a lot of those years, many years, as you I'm sure also know, assuming that the best way to continue to ask the kinds of questions that I liked to ask and to continue to write and to research and be in that nerdy zone that I loved to be in was going to mean that I would try to become a professor. That felt like that was the only option really if I wanted to keep doing what I loved to do, which was be in the classroom, be talking about big ideas and things that I thought mattered. And I didn't really ever consider alternate pathways, except when I considered, maybe it just not working out, like either applying for an academic job and not getting it, or, I don't know, something. I had sort of like nightmares and heard nightmare stories about how hard it was and how competitive and going on the job market and that kind of thing as a professor. But for the most part, I tried to just not think about it. I tried to just plow ahead and assume that I would deal with that when it came. And I spent my time, especially as a doctoral student, working as a TA and really kind of falling in love with academia. I could see a lot of issues with it, of course. I think most of us who are in it are probably better acquainted with the fissures and the ways that it could improve than anyone else. But I also felt like it still was worth it. I loved school and I loved universities and I loved being a PhD student. And I felt lucky to even have a spot where I could teach and have a stipend. And even though that wasn't a huge amount of money, and I'm going to talk more about that actually in a second, it felt so lucky. And I knew that I was lucky. And I knew that a lot of graduate students, especially in the States, don't have that kind of opportunity and end up deep in debt. I'm going to talk about that a little bit too, actually. And so I was really hopeful and I was really clear. And then I was moving through, especially the later part of my PhD, and I had passed my comprehensive exams and I was moving into the dissertation writing stage. And I had this idea to start taking some of what I taught in school and to share it with a small workshop, especially thinking, oh, maybe, and this was in the summer when I needed money, I didn't have my stipend. I was thinking maybe all my friends and I could take our work and what we do and what we teach, and maybe we could like present it at a bar or coffee shop to people who aren't in college anymore or didn't get a chance to study. I was teaching women's studies. It was like, I feel like I know women who would want to take a women's studies class, but they skipped it in college or for whatever reason, they didn't do it. I feel like they would maybe come to this. And I started to put together this little business. In fact, I actually asked different people that I knew to come do it with me, including Tristan. And we had this incredible experience of trying to almost, at least in my mind, this was what the goal was, almost democratize the academy a little bit. We called it Little Academy. And it was the very beginnings of my academic entrepreneurship journey, way before I knew, what this could turn into. At the time, I had really lofty, very unrealistic goals, thinking like this would make us all rich. I really thought everyone in the world might be as nerdy as we were, and that they would just flock to this and we'd be selling out and hundreds of people would be clamoring for a ticket. Instead, it was much more intimate. It was small conversations in a local bar, in a local coffee shop, but they were great. It was so great. And it was a really unique opportunity to see that we could take what we knew and what we were teaching and learning, and even what we were most passionate about, so many of us, either if we were already professors or we were graduate students, we had some moments where we were able to teach and talk about our favorite thing, but then a lot of moments where, you were teaching an intro class or teaching for someone else, or, you just got assigned to something. And Little Academy was this opportunity to take only your favorite part and teach that. You could teach about French film, or you could teach about the history of women in punk in DC, which was one that I taught, and really go deep. And then I had, the idea to pair it with cocktails and to sort of turn it into this evening. Well, the long story short is that we had a lot of fun. We did not make really a single dollar. In fact, I think it may have cost me money to run it, but it was such a window into what was possible. And it got our wheels turning, especially mine, and thinking about some of the ways to maybe bridge the gap. I had started that in a way to fill to fill a need, at least that I felt, about not having enough money while I was a graduate student and wanting to do something that still felt kind of fun and exciting, in addition to, random other jobs that I worked at the time. But then as I got closer to actually finishing, and then when I graduated, it just started to feel like building on that initial idea could turn into something a little bit bigger. And that was when I kind of discovered the world of coaching. I knew a little bit about it. I knew a friend or two who had a life coach or like a wellness coach. I think the first time I learned about a coach, it would have been on Gilmore Girls. They're talking about Oprah having a life coach, and I think they're pretty much making fun of it. But still, there was like this seed planted, and I started to explore it and decided to kind of in secret get a coaching certification. You actually don't need a certification to become a coach. You can just say that you're a coach. That's really all it takes, kind of like magic. But having a certification does help. And it can be nice to know a few tools so that you know where to start. And even though I didn't see anyone else doing this, I had this idea of kind of combining this thing we had already tried of Little Academy and taking our academic subjects and sharing them somehow with the world, and this other kind of entrepreneurial side of things that I was seeing where individual people could sort of set up shop and you could pay to talk to them and you could pay to ask them questions, and they could be somewhere in between like your therapist and your tutor and a little bit of like a mentor in this like official capacity. I didn't really know what I was going to do with it. And I told myself that it would just help me be a better teacher, right? Like, who couldn't use a little bit more scaffolding around the way we show up, the way we are for our students? I didn't get a lot of training in how to be a good professor, except just from watching how other people did it. And so some of those coaching questions from that coaching training were a little bit more about helping people set goals and uncovering what they really wanted and sort of getting at the heart of what they were really saying. I layered on a little bit of specializations in trauma. My dissertation had been about trauma, so it felt helpful to kind of go more deeply into how do you talk with people about this rather than just write about it. But I still didn't really know like how all the pieces were going to connect or what to do with it at all. And then I decided to just try it, to say that I was a coach. I was terrified of anyone I knew from school finding out because I had this idea that they would all think, kind of, who does she think she is to start coaching or mentoring? She doesn't know that much about what's going on. But I realized that I could kind of combine that initial impulse to share what I had been studying and teaching with some of these coaching skills. And that there was actually a whole world of people, especially in my case, I worked with women as a women's empowerment coach at the very beginning, this whole world of women in my community who were never going to take my women's studies classes. And they actually would rather have access to some of these kind of histories and deeper conversations. And this was going to be actually the only way to do that. So I made a little website on WordPress. I was scared of using my own name, so I came up with a name for my business. And I started to see clients, which was still very scary to call them rather than students or anything like that, at a little cafe. And it was really an interesting beginning because immediately I felt connected and I felt inspired by this. It felt like, oh my gosh, I have so much to say actually, now that we're here and now that I'm face to face with someone and they're asking questions about why, day-to-day parts of their lives are feeling so intense or oppressive and they're not sure what they want to do. And maybe they want to go back to school, maybe they want to change careers. And it's almost like all the nervousness that I had, like, am I really allowed to do this? is someone really going to pay me like just to talk to them about what I think and what I know, started to melt away because I actually had a lot to say and I knew how to listen based on all of those years of teaching. And I also knew how to bring in some stuff so that they didn't feel so alone. So, with women's empowerment in particular, I was finding that when my clients had histories with trauma or something around their relationship coming up, something around their career and how to balance like being a parent and having their own job, there was this part of me that could listen in and use the coaching skills I had for my certification and like all that stuff. And then every once in a while, I could also bring in feminist theory that I thought would really help them. And there was almost like this way to insert what I knew around, like, yeah, a lot of people write about the second shift, actually, where you're coming home and doing more labor. And of course, you're exhausted. Or bringing in what I had studied around trauma and sexual assault. And when my clients were starting to say, I feel like my body still remembers this scary moment, even though now I'm in this relationship and I'm so safe. And I could say, like, yeah, that makes sense. This is what scholars think about that. This is why this is happening. You might even like reading this and just feeling less alone. So one thing led to another. And I actually got to a place where I found that the work that felt the most, in a way, the most academic was more of this entrepreneurial stuff where I could write what I wanted to write. I could connect with clients about what I wanted to share and say, and almost see these bigger pieces that went beyond just kind of trying to be on track in my academic work. I still, though, felt really nervous because it still seemed like not the right path, that the right path and the right thing to do. And the thing that we had all said we wanted was to graduate and to look for an academic job, to take what you could get and to be, grateful for it. I found myself in a position of actually turning down a visiting assistant professor job and doing this business instead. And I felt insane. And, like so many people do, I had some personal reasons for doing that. It didn't feel like it was just an easy choice. And still, I held all this guilt and all these kind of weird feelings about, are my advisors going to think I was a waste of time? Is it going to feel like I'm, not as serious or not as smart? I really had so much ego wrapped up in people thinking of me as this scholarly person. And now I'm just going to be a life coach? I had some real questions about that. But what I found as we kept going was that it actually ended up helping a lot of the people in my life, including in my graduate program, to imagine other ways of utilizing our degree and other ways of even engaging with our community and our society in a way to use what we knew and then share it a little bit more broadly. Now, I certainly don't think every single academic needs to set up a coaching business on the side or anything like that, but it did get my wheels turning that we could use more consultants and bloggers and writers and people who are taking what they've learned, especially these really specialized and insightful years of study, whether it's in our master's degrees or in our PhD degrees, these graduate focuses that we've got really felt so needed in society. I started to get to this point, especially over the last few years, where it felt like we need interpretations and analyses and conversations to be had by more people who've spent the time to really look at the past and to look at literature and to look at society and the way that we behave together. I wanted more think pieces and courses online and coaching opportunities and consultants to come in and be able to say, this is how all of this fits together. And I started to get really excited about the thought of more of us having that entrepreneurial dimension to our work. For some people, I think it is going to mean it's just on the side, that you've got that more traditional academic job, but that you're also writing on Medium or getting published in Huffington Post or kind of stepping into that role of the kind of public intellectual. And I think for others of us, including for me, it's going to mean that our vision for what you can do with a doctorate or what you can do with a master's is going to just continue to expand, because I find more and more that my clients and even my community at large, people who aren't clients, but who are just following along, they're actually deeply craving that rigorous kind of conversation that we get to have in academia. And for the most part, when people aren't in it, they don't, they're lucky to get a really thoughtful editorial piece or, maybe to have a good book recommendation. But for the most part, that kind of public intellectual figure, that thought leadership piece is missing for a lot of our community. And I actually think that we can consider entrepreneurship to be one way that not only can we have our own needs met and actually like make some money, maybe get out of the debt that our education could have hoisted upon us, but actually also step into that role of guiding society a little bit, or at least offering different questions so that we can take what we learned and bring it out. For one kind of anecdotal example, over the summer in the coaching industry, in the wake of everything that was going on around Black Lives Matter protests and people getting involved, I saw that so many white coaches who looked like me were kind of trying to start reading Kimberly Crenshaw and Audre Lorde, and they really wanted to be well versed in intersectionality and critical race theory. And of course, they had, kind of no idea what they were doing, which makes sense. How would they? And it was really, really helpful that I'd had a lot of training in my own graduate degree, and that a few other people that I'm connected with were kind of straddling that same dual reality of academia and coaching, including a few women of color who I work with who take that on as their coaching work. And we could all step in and be like, okay, let's share what we've learned about this. And it's just one moment. And I know not everyone's got kind of the same access to a knowledge bank that's going to then turn into this kind of political moment that we need right away. But it felt like such a good example. People need help from the people who've spent all this time working with texts and studying them and really getting to know them. And, I think we all know this about theory, but it's not always super accessible if you haven't had someone help you understand it, if you haven't spent years getting intimate with it and being kind of right in the mix and in the conversation. You can probably imagine some of the things that you work on or the classes that you've been the most interested in, and the ways that people around us could really benefit from knowing more, whether that is theories about capitalism or travel and tourism or film and, the gaze or anything like that, that we almost get to take for granted, that we get to have these big conversations and not everybody does. So that's kind of the big picture overview. My business now, Uncover, is one where I train other coaches, I coach my own clients, and then I've got a little team that helps run, live programs, and then also some that are recorded. And I really blend my academic work with my kind of life experience and what I learned in my own trainings and kind of mix it all together. And now I really love helping other people do the same thing, whether it's friends from academia who kind of want to apply this and do something of their own, or it's clients who just, they want that kind of advice or space, but from people who kind of know what they're talking about. And I think that's where all of you could come in if you wanted. So I see that there are some questions, and I see, let's see, there's a chat. Yeah, feel free to start asking your questions. I'm happy to go into more detail about anything. It is called Uncover, so I'm like an open book, but
Yes, so thank you so much, Kim. That was absolutely wonderful, and your story is, I know, very inspiring to a lot of students who have already asked a question. A couple of questions for you first. You talked a lot about the guilt that you felt after leaving academia. And so, as you know, here at AAP, we have students in a wide variety of disciplines: communication, environmental sciences, government, and so on and so forth. And so I think that when you set your mind onto a career, whether that be in communication, marketing, government, or as an academics, there's always, some guilt associated with that if you don't follow through. And it's especially strong, as you know, in academia, where academia resembles a cult in many ways, where there are codes and values and discourses that I think nobody outside of academia actually understands. Um, uh, how did you get over that? How did you get over that guilt?
that's such a good question. And I love the way that you're kind of reminding me and bringing us into the reality that, like, it's so easy to slip into that almost no matter
Yeah.
what industry. There's that sense of like, oh, I'm like not following the rules.
Mhm,
That was
mhm,
a
mhm.
big feeling that I had, especially, and this might not be relevant for anybody else here, but especially because for me, I went into intimacy coaching. And so I was like, putting pictures of myself on the internet and like lingerie. And it was like, wow, you really are not supposed to do that if you're like applying for tenure,
Mhm,
like
mhm,
that
mhm.
idea, even in women's studies, even with how kind of sex positive and liberal my departments had been, it still was going to be weird, if they found that. And, I think there's both a positive and a negative way that that guilt started to dissipate for me. And the negative was actually that I started to get angry at academia first. It was like, you know what? There are no jobs, there is no security. There is this sense in which, as a graduate student, and then all the way up through, I was watching labor be made more and more precarious and more exploited.
Mhm.
And I started to feel like, why should I have an allegiance to this system, this industry that doesn't seem to have any allegiance to us? One of the pivotal moments, which is so, it's just kind of interesting timing, because it was right as I was finishing, I was about to defend my dissertation and like wrap everything up. And one of my advisors left the school and left academia actually altogether.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that in and of itself was like kind of an interesting moment, because I was watching him navigate, like, should I go somewhere else? But then I watched the school take that job that had been a full-time professor position in our department and chop it up into 3 adjunct positions, so that each class was just taught for like $3,000 or something at GW,
Mhm. Mhm.
and no health insurance, like nothing. And of course, I know there's so much behind the scenes that I don't know about, but I do remember watching that and being like, I don't feel guilty anymore for teaching my own classes online. Like, look at what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if we wanted to stay, so many people couldn't.
Mhm.
Then the more positive version, and the one I would probably tell, at a cocktail party or something instead, was there was that sense of almost like civic duty and excitement around the thought of like, what if some of these ideas get to escape, like escape the ivory tower and escape academia? What if we could almost be like Robin Hood and like bring some of them out and like share
Mhm.
them? And especially with what you were mentioning with people who are in environmental science and thinking about different ways that we can be doing things, it's almost like more obvious, like, oh, of course we need consultants who have done all this deep work and training. And of course we need people, running businesses who actually have studied like social impact and
Yeah.
history. They're not just like out here like running wild.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
was it was definitely both.
Yeah. Yeah. Other question to you also related to that. You mentioned that you get a coaching degree or license.
Mhm.
Uh, what other type of education degree certificate did you do after your PhD in order to run your business? Did you get any courses in how to run a social media account, how to run a website? Did you do all of that on your own? Did you hire people? How did that work?
No, I love that question. And I see in the chat somebody mentioned
Yeah.
a program that I have heard really great things about. I haven't graduated from this myself, but that at Georgetown, they do, I know, have an executive coaching program. But I will say my own journey was really interesting. The first thing I did was I hired my own coach, and I didn't tell anyone. I was like very nervous and embarrassed in a way about it, but she had a business that I really loved. It'd be the equivalent of somebody kind of hiring me to see like, okay, I want to do what you do and maybe, whatever else comes up.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
And I found that to be really helpful. And then I did go through a coaching program at a place called the Dragon Tree. I'm happy to share links, or it's a little bit more spiritual in some ways, or maybe that's not the right word, but maybe more of a wellness kind of coaching training. And so there was a lot about like Ayurveda and like a lot about kind of balancing parts of you. And I don't necessarily use all of that. And I think I found it a little bit more because a friend had been in that one. And I was like, oh, good, I want to be a coach. But
Mhm.
the way they taught me to ask questions was really great. And then that did actually end up being why my team and I created our own coaching training, because we were like, we don't really have one that we recommend as a go-to. So especially for anybody who's more interested in that like intimacy coaching style, I would recommend mine. And then I have heard amazing things about the Georgetown one, especially for people who might want to do more business coaching.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And so, thank you so much for everything that you're sharing. This is very inspiring, and I know to a lot of students here. I'm going to switch to the students' question because we have a lot. We have one question from Linda, who's asking, and you can answer that a little bit. There are many coaching certificates out there, including those focused on feminine power. How would a person select the best program for them?
Yeah, that's a great question, especially because like many people who I know, I've bought things and done programs that in the end I wouldn't recommend, and then some that were just amazing. And so, you don't want to say that like you just have to try it, because you want there to be some rhyme or reason to it. But I do think that by now I've gotten to a place where I see a lot more, I don't know, I feel like a little bit more discerning and intuitive about it. And I would say if you're comparing a bunch, or you're kind of feeling into different programs, especially when it's something a little bit more ephemeral like feminine power or empowerment and confidence, and these things that, they could mean something different to everyone, I would really look at who is leading them. It might seem obvious, but I don't think I always thought that way. I think I was more in that school frame of mind of like, what subjects will I learn? And now I think I'm a little bit more discerning about who is in charge, how diverse
Yeah.
is the team, how is power and profit getting shared in this company? Is this just about one woman getting really rich, or is it like all her team is rising together and working on this together and kind of nurturing? And I would also say, some of those same skills that we hone in academia, especially around like reading and reading against the grain, like you can apply that to people's work and their blog and their business. Like, did they say something about, a moment that really mattered to you, or did they keep quiet just to sort of like stay shiny and plastic. It might seem obvious, but I really think a few years ago, I wasn't thinking that way yet.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, thank you. Matt is asking, how do you pitch or advertise your service and through what mediums?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I have used basically all organic marketing. There are other ways to do it too, like with Facebook ads and different kind of media and PR pitching services. But what I find is that those tend to be really expensive and not necessary. I would just recommend social media. So, what I did, and something that I think probably would feel a little safer for most people, is I created a second account, a second Instagram account. I had a Facebook page, and it was like for the business. And I kind of
Mm,
let myself separate myself a little bit, especially at the beginning of like, this is Uncover. And like,
mhm.
here I am. And now they blend.
Kim, if I can cut you off here, how did that work? How did you separate, like
Yeah.
you were not on, because you said that at first you were still
Yeah.
trying to pursue an academic career, right? So you
Yeah.
didn't want people to see pictures of you
Yeah.
on Instagram. So how did that work?
Yeah, no, it's such a good question. And it's kind of funny to think about now, because now
Yeah,
it's like such a blend and I'm just like,
yeah.
come on in, and everybody
Mm,
knows everything.
mm,
But yeah, at the very beginning, it would have been like, okay, create new account, Uncover coaching, and like a
yeah.
picture maybe of there are a couple of kind of just like offhand resources that people might want to know about. Maybe you already do, but there's this place Unsplash where you can get royalty-free photos that
Mhm.
artists just share. So I used that a lot. I used Canva to make some graphics, and it would be
Yeah.
like picture of coffee, a little graphic about intimacy, a picture of women working, and being like, here, I'm coming out, here's my business. And then a few people did know, and they would help refer friends or make connections. And then I also would look for local, this is a little harder now with the pandemic, but hopefully this will be an option soon. Look for local opportunities. So for me, a local art studio was really instrumental, a local cafe where they would
Yeah.
let me put up flyers and host classes and that kind of very organic work.
Mhm.
What I would encourage though now for anyone starting now, and especially anyone here, is I would say be braver than me. Like combine it all, because what people actually want is your expertise and your experience. So if I had just gone straight to what I do now of like, hi, I'm Kim, I have all this training and I'm a coach, I could have shaved years off of that process. So either direction is okay. But if you feel like you can just kind of soothe the part of you that feels nervous and put it out there to the world, what I have found is that people I would never have expected to care are becoming clients. My mom's friend's daughter,
Yeah,
people
yeah,
are
yeah, yeah, yeah.
watching. And so I would recommend to use your personal channels. And even if you do create one for your business, to share it on your personal channels, because you just never know who
Yeah.
needs you. And
Mhm,
I have actually been really encouraged by
mhm,
that.
mhm. Thank you, Kim. Another question by Brian. Describe how you define your target market. And Brian also mentioned that it seems that your market has evolved over time.
Yeah, that's a great question. I will say that it's evolved because I at first kind of felt only qualified to talk with people who maybe were a few steps behind me, like on the same journey. So, like, I had been divorced, I had been in graduate school. I was like, well, I could talk to people about those two things, maybe like one
Mhm.
other thing, but it felt very narrow. Like, I could really only mentor people up to the point I had gotten to. And then I started to get inquiries and kind of clients who wanted more, even if they were parents and I wasn't, or even if they were whatever, doing something else. And I started to realize, like, oh, it's just about asking the right questions and sort of being here holding this space. I could actually coach probably anybody, because it's not about me, it's about them. And that was a big switch where I realized like, oh, my target market could just be who I would have the most fun working with. And so now I work with men and women. I used to only work with women. And I love working with people on building their own businesses, on building their own relationships. And it feels kind of like, oh, my target market now is anyone I like and who I would want to hang out with. But before, I think it felt like anyone who was a bit behind me. One thing I'll also add, because I could imagine this being more relevant to some of you. So if you want to go the more personal coaching route, this is what I've done. But for a little while, I did also do workshops for corporations that were more kind of like wellness workshops or vision board workshops or that kind of thing. And I only stopped because I was having too much fun over here doing my thing. But that's another big opening, and they really need people to come in and help them because our economy is crumbling. And so, that's like another niche that I could imagine a lot of people here filling and kind of bringing their expertise into some of those fields as a consultant, maybe working with HR departments and saying like, let's do a workshop on this, or, let's change some of these practices.
Yeah, David has a very good question here, very technical.
Okay.
How do I file to make an entrepreneurial business? Would this be a for-profit business, or is this considered consulting?
Yeah, that's a great question. So and I see one other about liability. I think I can
Yeah,
answer these together,
yeah.
because what I did was I formed a limited liability corporation, so an LLC, and it's really easy to do that. And technically, for tax purposes, you don't need to. You can just operate as a sole proprietor if it's just you. All you have to do is just report the income that you make if it's over $600. But I liked being an LLC because of that liability, because I am talking with people about some more kind of personal stuff. It just protects you. It means if anyone, and this has never happened to me, but if anyone ever did try to sue or to say like, you're my coach and like I still got sick or whatever, that then your business is a separate entity from you. And so I used LegalZoom to make mine. I now have a lawyer who I talk to about any kind of bigger thing, because I ended up hiring employees and I wanted to give them healthcare and like that kind of stuff. But for
Yeah.
years, I didn't. It was just me and my computer and my LLC status. And like, that was it. And that's what I would recommend, whether you are going to be a coach or a consultant, just because it's such a nice thing to be able to put like on your invoices and in your documents, like, I made it Kimberly Rose Pendleton Coaching LLC, and it was
Mhm,
very easy.
mhm, okay. Nina, we have a lot of MLS students tonight.
Mhm.
This is so encouraging because it's the same conversation I've been having for years about entrepreneurial academics, which is what led me to the MLA at JHU. I've been able to reach clientele overseas and meet great success, but honestly, here in the States, it's been more of a challenge. How would you recommend expanding business here when academia can be so rigid when it comes to this kind of creative extension of education?
Mm, I love this question, and I wish I had more of an answer. I will say that I have been shocked by how, I was so afraid of what reactions I was going to get from my advisors and from my other
Mhm.
students. And I don't know, I probably would have been nervous even to tell Tristan about it at the beginning. But then instead, everyone, 100% of people have been like, oh, this is a great idea. We need more of this. And I could be just lucky, I think I was in a great department. Not everyone can say that, although hopefully everyone here can. And I had great friends, but I do think more than ever, people are craving more options. And I think that in academia, there is a sense of the looming crisis that we're creating as we give more and more people degrees and we don't have tenure track jobs for them. And so I really do think it's up to us, if we can, to create some of the conversations about filling that gap with these other options. And so I would be loud about it and I would talk about it. And, I'm happy to keep talking about it with you. Like, let's make them all talk about this, because this plan that we've got in place right now, where like there's only one option, but even that is not really available, and like old professors aren't actually retiring, and like even when they do, we're chopping up their job into precarious labor. It's like, okay, well, we got to change something. So, Nina, maybe you can be part of that, and maybe I can too. And I would love for that to change and there to be more academic jobs in addition. But in the meantime, I wonder if we can take matters into our own hands a little bit here. Not that we should have to, but
Sarah here has a fun question. Have you ever had to deal with a client who might have been unhappy with your services and who maybe was rude in some way?
Sarah, yes. So this is such interesting timing, because I have been thinking a lot about this just this week and talking about it with a few people. But something really interesting happened. So, one of the ways that I branded my business, and you wouldn't have to do it this way, but you can, was very much like personal branding. Like, this is me, here I am, I can talk to you, I'll be your coach. And so you're putting a lot of your own thoughts out there. And it's a lot of like, here's my life, here are my thoughts, here's my journal, here's what I'm thinking about this. And over the summer, I posted a lot about Black Lives Matter, but one day I posted the Ben and Jerry's anti discrimination statement, and one of my clients got so mad because the Ben and Jerry's statement had, I mean, it was kind of crass, whatever. They're an ice cream company. They were like, we have a new flavor. It's called Fuck the Police or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, it's blueberry. It was like, hilarious. But my client was really upset. She was not happy with my political beliefs. And she actually tried to get her money back from what she had paid me. And then PayPal, which is who I use for people to pay me. And that's what I recommend still, even though this happened.
Mm-hmm.
But they put out like a freeze on my account. And I didn't know what to do. And I was so nervous. And then that was when I connected with my lawyer, who, happy to pass on in case anyone ever needs in the future. But she helped me write a statement about what was going on, and we won. So that's luckily the only time that's ever happened. Most of my clients are great. Most of my clients agree with my politics, I think, because I'm so loud about them. Mm-hmm. But that one time when it could have gone really bad, she had paid maybe the previous year. I think she was just so angry. Mm-hmm. She didn't win. So hopefully that's like reassuring to anyone who feels a little bit nervous.
We have two more questions, Kim. Yakir is asking, what advice do you have for marketing and selling your academic skill sets?
Yes, this is such a good question. I feel like I took a long time to, and maybe this is still evolving, but for me to feel like I could really put into words how we can be useful in a way outside of the classroom and outside of our research. But one of the best, I think, skills that you learn in academia and that you kind of don't learn anywhere else is that critical analysis, and that kind of not taking things just on face value, really bringing context in, whether it's context for our own kind of feelings in the moment or the politics we see. But, very recently, I was able to write an article for a religion blog, and I was nervous about that because it's a lot of my former colleagues, but I could bring together what I had worked on with my clients around their own religious backgrounds and what I had studied in my dissertation and in my work to write an analysis of the coup, the insurrection on January 6th. Because I saw this connection with the evangelical politics that I had looked at that I didn't see anyone writing about. And I think that's such a good example of what we can do in this kind of academic entrepreneur blend, because not everyone's going to have that ability to not just see what's happening now, but to connect it with, in my case, the personal lives of who I get to talk to, and then also this like history and social kind of brewing feeling.
Yeah.
And so I think that you can really lean into the fact that, not necessarily that I would say, go around telling everyone you're smarter than everyone else, but there's this sense of I'm able to see context that not everybody has.
Yeah.
And that's so helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have, and of course, I want to remind everybody in attendance that Kim is teaching a course this summer for the Master of Liberal Arts. And the last question that we have for you here, Kim, is a question by Colleen, who's asking, does your coaching impact how you teach at Johns Hopkins?
I love that question. What a beautiful place to end. So, I do have a funny answer to that, which is that I realized my coaching style had been blending into my teaching style when
Yeah.
I asked the students in my last course, okay, think about how you want to feel when you turn in your final paper. And I was like, wait a minute, that's a coaching question, isn't it?
Yeah.
But what was so interesting was that the answers were so great. It was people tapping into like, I want to feel accomplished and proud. And I want to feel like I've done work that really matters. And I want to feel inspired. And I had them connect to that vision and then keep checking in with it. And at the end, we got to circle back and think like, is that how you feel? And it was one of these really beautiful moments where I had seen all along how my academic training bled into coaching, but I
Yeah.
hadn't yet seen coaching come the other way.
Yeah.
But there
Yeah.
I did. So I invite everyone to tap into that, and think about how do we want to feel at the end of all this, whether it's our PhD or our
Mm-hmm.
first job or our first publication or our business, getting launched. How do we want to feel? It's a classic coaching question, and it's what I really love.
Yeah. I mean, that's that. I love this. And I have one last question for you, Kim, because I saw a recent post about this on your Instagram. Of course, money is important for everybody. I mean, we all need, to pay the bills. You mentioned a visiting assistant professorship that you decided not to accept in the end. Those positions pay what in America? 60K, 70K? I mean, I think this is about it, like if you're lucky.
If you win
Um,
the jackpot,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. If you win the lottery, you get to make 60K a year.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so I know that your business is blooming, has grown. I know that you've been hiring people too. How are you doing now when it
Yeah.
comes to the
I mean,
financial stability of it?
financial side. Yeah. I love it because, I do think it's important to talk about. I don't think we talk about money enough,
Mhm.
but you're so right. 60,
Especially in
maybe
academia, right? Yeah.
especially in
Yeah.
academia.
Yeah.
It's like, oh no.
Mhm.
But we made $500,000 in my business last year. We
Mhm.
made
Mhm.
that whole amount even with the pandemic, and I've been able to pay my own team. Of course, like I still can't wait for even more growth and more people to join us because I know, we get inquiries about people who want to coach with us, but it's incredible. I would never, ever have guessed that we would
And
be
and that
place.
visiting assistant professorship was what, 4 or 5 years ago? Okay, so so yeah, in less than 5 years, you've been able to go a long way, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And you're absolutely right. That amount, that maybe $70,000 a year would have been me feeling like this is the most money I could even imagine. And we made that an uncover last month,
mhm,
because
mhm,
it's just
mhm.
like this gets to grow. And so
Yeah.
I won't pretend that all that money goes right into my pocket. Like, of
Mhm,
course,
mhm. Yeah,
it goes to the team and taxes and all that stuff, but still, I can't believe it. And I
yeah.
really think it's important to talk about that side of it too.
Mhm. Absolutely. Kim, I know that you've been inspiring to a lot of students tonight, and that was wonderful to see you. Congratulations on your wonderful business that you are right. I didn't know about during the first year I had known you. I learned about the business way later.
Yeah.
And also
Thank
to everybody who wants to attend Kim's class, remind me the title of the course, Kim.
For the summer, I think it will be the shape of things
Yeah, the
about
shape of things.
embodiment. So that would be so lovely to have any of you join.
Yeah, and Kim is a wonderful professor, as you can see. So please do register for Kim's course, and of course, email her if you have any questions about shaping your own business. Okay. We will see you. This recording will be available to you on YouTube, and you will receive a link to the recording sometime this week or next week. And don't forget also to join us for our final webinar on academic careers, which will be on publishing next month in April. Thank you for joining, and we will see you very soon. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.